3 weeks ago, I spit into a small plastic tube that cost me $69 because my 12-year-old daughter Chloe wanted to know if we were really 14% Irish like my mother always claimed, and I did not do it to destroy my family or learn that my entire life, every birthday, every holiday, every single memory of my father's face, was built on a lie, but that's exactly what happened because my name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old, I have a husband named Dave, 2 kids, and a minivan with a sticky juice stain on the back seat that has been there for 3 years and will probably survive the apocalypse, and I live in a normal house in a normal neighborhood in normal suburban Ohio where nothing about my life was extraordinary until last Tuesday when that email arrived and I learned that the man who raised me, the man whose shoulders I sat on at county fairs, whose terrible British accent I laughed at every Christmas Eve, whose eyes got wet at my high school graduation, was not my father, and nobody told me for 34 years, not once, and let me tell you about the family I thought I had, my parents Linda and Robert who met in college in the 1980s in a classic story where boy meets girl, boy falls for girl, they marry young, have a baby in 1990, and settle into a quiet life in the suburbs where my dad was an engineer. A quiet guy who loved working with his hands and spent weekends in the garage tinkering with old radios that never actually worked again after he fixed them. And my mom stayed home until I started school, then worked part-time at the local library because she loved being around books, and we were normal, boring even in the best way possible. Every Sunday we had pot roast, the same recipe every single week that my mom would put in the oven before church, and by the time we got home the whole house smelled like Sunday. Every summer we drove 14 hours to Myrtle Beach, same hotel, same week every year where my dad would get sunburned on the first day and spend the rest of the week lobster-ed but refusing to admit it hurt. Every Christmas Eve my dad would read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" in this terrible fake British accent that made my mom roll her eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck, and he did it every year and it never got less terrible and it never got less perfect. And I have a photo from 1995 where I'm 5 years old sitting on my dad's shoulders at the county fair holding this giant pink cotton candy bigger than my head, smeared all over his bald spot while he laughed and I laughed and my mom took the picture, that photo that lived on our refrigerator for 15 years, that photo that is also a lie because the man in that photo who taught me to ride a bike, who walked me to the bus stop on the first day of kindergarten, who cried at my high school graduation, was not my father. He was just a man who loved me like one, and I didn't know the difference until 3 weeks ago when it started with Chloe coming home from school one day obsessed with genealogy after her social studies class did a unit on family history, and she was hooked saying, "Mom, did you know that Genghis Khan has like 16 million descendants? Mom, can we do that thing where you spit in a tube? Mom, Grandma always says we're Irish. How Irish are we really?" And I laughed her off at first, but Chloe doesn't let things go because that's her superpower. She's been that way since she was 3 years old, asking why about everything until you either give her a real answer or admit you don't know. And she made a PowerPoint presentation, I'm not joking, 12 years old, and she made a full PowerPoint with graphs showing the popularity of DNA testing and a how it works slide with diagrams and a budget slide proving that the kit cost less than her monthly allowance, and she presented it at the dinner table and Dave was so impressed he almost cried. So I ordered one for both of us as a little mother-daughter science project, something to do together on a Tuesday afternoon. And the box arrived on a Tuesday and we opened it together at the kitchen table and we spat in the tubes laughing about how weird it felt, and Chloe sealed hers up carefully like it was made of gold while I tossed mine in the mailbox on the way to work the next morning, and then I forgot about it for 3 weeks, completely forgot about it while still living in the world where I knew who I was. Until 3 weeks later I was lying in bed at 11:47 p.m. unable to sleep, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, Instagram, Facebook, delete some emails, check the weather for tomorrow, and then I saw an email from the DNA company saying your DNA results are ready, and I almost waited until morning but curiosity won, so I opened the app and watched the loading screen spin and saw my results: 49% Ireland, 22% England, 12% Germany. And then under close family matches there was a name I didn't recognize, a man listed as my father whose name was not Robert but Michael Donovan. A name I had never seen before in my life, and I stared at that screen for I don't know how long while minutes or hours stopped meaning anything and the numbers blurred together and my brain kept trying to find an explanation, like maybe it was a mistake or the test was wrong or Robert had a secret twin brother no one knew about, or maybe there was a glitch in the system, but deep down I already knew and I just didn't want to say it out loud. And next to his name there was a button that said send message, but I didn't press it. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling the floor drop out from under me again and again until 7 a.m. when I got in my car and drove to my parents' house, where my mom was in the kitchen making her famous banana bread, and the smell hit me as soon as I walked in, warm and sweet and familiar, and she smiled at me, that same smile from every photo, every memory, every single lie, and said, "Sweetie, what a nice surprise, want some coffee?" And I sat down at the kitchen table where I'd done my homework and eaten Thanksgiving dinner every year of my life and told them I was pregnant with Chloe, and I said, "Mom, I did a DNA test," and she stopped stirring the batter just for a second, but I saw it and said, "Oh, that's interesting, what did you find out?" And I said, "I found out that Dad isn't my dad," and the words hung in the air like smoke while my mom didn't move for 15 seconds, standing there with a wooden spoon in her hand, back partially turned, until she finally turned around with her face gray like all the color had drained out, and she said, "Sarah," and I said, "Who is he, Mom? Who is my real father?" And she sat down across from me and reached for my hands, but I pulled away, and she said, "His name is Michael Donovan. We were together before I met your dad just for a few months, and I got pregnant and he wasn't ready and he left and I never saw him again." And I said, "And you just decided never to tell me?" And she said, "Sarah, it was different then. People talked, my family would have been so ashamed. And then I met Robert and he loved you so much and he wanted to be your dad and we thought it was better this way, better for you." And I said, "Better for me, Mom? I'm 34 years old, I have a daughter, I have medical history I don't know, heritage I don't understand, and apparently a whole other family that exists somewhere that I've never met. How is any of this better for me?" And she started crying then, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. But I couldn't comfort her because my dad, Robert, the man who raised me, was in the garage where he spent most weekends tinkering with those old radios, his happy place, and I found him sitting at his workbench holding a photo of me from high school graduation in my cap and gown with big smile and his arm around my shoulders. And he looked up when I walked in with red eyes and said, "Your mom called," she said, "you know." And I sat down on an old crate and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And he set the photo down carefully and ran his hands over his face and for a long moment didn't say anything, just sat there breathing, until he finally said, "Because I was scared, because I thought if you knew I wasn't your real father you wouldn't love me anymore, because I'm a coward, Sarah. I'm a coward who loved you so much it made me stupid." And I started crying and said, "You are my real father, you're the one who raised me, you're the one who taught me to drive, you're the one who held me when I got my heart broken in high school, that's real, that's all real." And he said, "But I'm not your blood." And I said, "I don't care about blood, I care about the man who showed up every single day for 34 years. And we sat there in the garage for a long time crying and not saying much, but something had shifted because the secret was out and somehow we were still here. And for 3 days after that I stared at that name on my phone, Michael Donovan, and I googled him and found a Facebook profile of a man in his 60s living in Pennsylvania with grandkids and a nice house, who liked fishing and the Philadelphia Eagles, looking completely ordinary, like someone you'd see at the grocery store and never think twice about. And I must have opened that profile 100 times, closed it, opened it again, typed messages and deleted them, typed again and deleted again, because what do you say to the father you never knew? "Hi, I'm the daughter you abandoned 34 years ago. Hey, remember that baby you ran away from? She's all grown up now." Nothing felt right until finally on the 4th day I typed a message saying, "Hi, my name is Sarah. According to a DNA test you might be my biological father. I'm not looking for anything except information and maybe some medical history. I understand if this is a shock, I'm shocked too." And I hit send before I could change my mind and put my phone face down on the counter and tried to pretend my heart wasn't pounding out of my chest. And he responded 6 hours later saying, "Sarah, I've wondered about you every single day for 34 years, yes, I'm your father, I'd love to talk whenever you're ready." So we met at a diner halfway between our houses, neutral ground safe, a place where neither of us had any memories, and I got there early and sat in a booth by the window and ordered coffee I didn't drink and watched the door. And when he walked in I knew him immediately, same shape of face as the man in my mirror, same eyes, and he was there before me actually. He'd come early too, sitting in a booth by the window, and when I walked in he stood up so fast he nearly knocked over his coffee and said Sarah, and I said hi, and we shook hands in the weirdest, most formal moment of my life, shaking hands with my own father, and we talked for 3 hours about how he met my mom at a concert and they dated for a few months, how young and stupid they both were, how he panicked when she told him she was pregnant and his own parents pressured him to do the right thing, but he was 22 and terrified and he ran. And he said, I've regretted it every single day. I looked for you online over the years, tried to find you on social media, but I didn't know your last name, I didn't know anything, I just hoped you were okay. And I told him about my life, about Robert the dad who raised me, about Chloe, about Dave, about my job and my house and my normal suburban existence, and he listened like every word mattered, like he was memorizing each detail. And at the end he reached into his wallet and pulled out a folded, worn photograph of a woman holding a baby, me at 3 days old, and said, I've carried this for 34 years. I never stopped thinking about you, and for the first time I looked at this stranger and felt something shift, because he wasn't my dad. Robert was my dad, but he was my father, and maybe there was room in my life for both. And the hardest conversation was with Chloe when she came home from school, dropped her backpack and immediately started asking about the DNA results, saying, Mom, did you get them? Are we Irish? Are we related to anyone famous? And I sat her down on her bed and said, baby, I need to tell you something. The DNA test showed something surprising, something I didn't know. And her face went through about 15 emotions in 3 seconds, and she said, what, are you dying? Oh my God, are you dying? And I said, no, nothing like that. It's just, remember how Grandpa Robert is my dad? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, it turns out he's not my biological father. I have a different biological father, someone I never knew about. And she stared at me blinking and said, so Grandpa Robert is still my grandpa, right? And I said, yes, absolutely yes, he'll always be your grandpa. And she said, and this other guy, is he? Do I have another grandpa now? And I said, I don't know, sweetheart, maybe. Would that be okay? And she thought about it for a minute and said, can I get 2 birthday presents now? And I laughed. Actually laughed for the first time in weeks, and said, you're something else, you know that? And she said, Mom, 2 birthday presents. Leave it to a 12-year-old to find the silver lining. And then a week later my mom and Robert came over for dinner, and Michael was there too, because I invited them all together, same table, same food, same room, because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment, or maybe because I was tired of keeping everyone separate, tired of managing everyone's feelings, tired of the secret that had already taken 34 years of my life. And the first 10 minutes were excruciating, with my mom unable to look at Michael. Every time she glanced in his direction her eyes darted away like she'd been burned, and Robert shook his hand when he arrived but didn't say a single word after that, just sat at the end of the table staring at his plate, and Michael kept trying to make small talk about the weather, which nobody wanted to hear. And I was about to lose my mind when Chloe saved the day by marching up to Michael with her tablet and saying, so, like, genetically speaking, how much Irish am I? Because Mom's results were confusing. And Michael blinked, then laughed and said, well, let me tell you about my mother. She was from County Cork and she made the best soda bread you've ever tasted. And by the end of dinner they were all talking, not easily, not without awkward pauses, but talking, and Robert asked Michael about his job and my mom actually laughed at one of his stories. And when Michael left he shook Robert's hand and said, thank you for raising her, you did a beautiful job, and Robert nodded and didn't say much, but I saw his eyes get wet. 2 fathers, 1 dinner table, and somehow it worked. And now it's been 6 months since that DNA test arrived, 6 months since my world cracked open, and here's what I've learned. First, that secrets don't protect anyone, because my parents thought they were protecting me by hiding the truth. They thought they were saving me from confusion and pain and the shame of being different, but all they did was delay the pain and make it worse when it finally came, because the truth has a way of coming out. It doesn't care about your good intentions or your fears. It just waits and grows and eventually demands to be heard. Second, that family isn't just blood, because Robert isn't my biological father, but he's still my dad. He's the one who taught me to ride a bike. He's the one who cried at my wedding. He's the one my daughter calls grandpa with absolute certainty that he'll show up for her every single time, and blood doesn't make a father, showing up does. Third, that family is also blood, because Michael is a stranger who shares my DNA, and now slowly, carefully we're building something new. A relationship that doesn't replace what I have with Robert but exists alongside it, different, complicated, but real. And I have 2 fathers now, one who raised me and one who never stopped thinking about me, and fourth that the people who love you will surprise you because my mom thought I would hate her if I knew the truth but instead we're closer now than we've been in years because secrets create distance and the truth, even painful truth, brings people back together, and Robert was afraid I wouldn't love him anymore, but love isn't that fragile. The love he gave me for 34 years didn't disappear because of biology. It was never about blood, it was about showing up every single day. And Michael spent 34 years carrying guilt and regret, afraid to reach out, afraid of being rejected, and now he comes to Sunday dinners and texts me bad jokes and is learning how to be a grandfather to Chloe, who true to her word expects birthday presents from both grandpas. And last Sunday we had pot roast. Robert made it with his recipe he's been making for 40 years. The same pot roast from every Sunday of my childhood, and Michael brought a pie, store-bought because he can't bake but he tried. And my mom set the table with the same dishes she's had since I was a kid, the ones with the little flowers on the edge, and Chloe told a long complicated story about drama at school that none of us completely followed, using a lot of hand gestures. And I sat there looking at this strange, beautiful, messy family, and I thought about that night 6 months ago, lying in bed at 11:47 p.m. staring at my phone, feeling the floor drop out from under me, and the floor did drop, but I didn't fall because they caught me, all of them. The father who raised me, the father I just met, the mother who kept a secret because she was scared, the daughter who just wanted 2 birthday presents, and this is my family, complicated, imperfect, rebuilt from secrets and lies and difficult truths, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. So if you're watching this and you're carrying a secret, if there's something you haven't told the people you love, I'm not going to tell you that revealing it will be easy, because it won't. It might be the hardest thing you ever do, but I will tell you this. Secrets are heavy, they wear you down from the inside, they grow in the dark, taking up more and more space until there's no room left for anything else, and the people who love you are stronger than you think. They might surprise you, they might catch you when the floor drops out. And my name is Sarah, I'm 34 years old, I have 2 fathers, 1 mother, a daughter who expects 2 birthday presents, and a life that finally makes sense because the truth didn't destroy my family, it just showed me what it was really made of.